I thought about you all the time. In a matter of weeks, Willie Nelson abruptly canceled all of his tour dates, stopped working on his musical endeavors, and almost vanished from the press. He once said, "I'll keep singing until I can't breathe," at the age of 92. This time, however, every indication points to a more dire situation. What's actually going on with him? What is causing his team to remain silent? And why won't even his closest friends and family speak out? What is taking place is a significant change that cannot be disregarded. When Willie Nelson started 2025, he had a number of blatant indications that his body was defying his iron will. His deep, well-known voice grew progressively shorter. His once proud schedule had breaks all the time, and his Outlaw Music Festival tour gigs were cut short. He said he was all right after each postponement. However, his team's administrative choices demonstrated differently. A protracted cycle of uncertainty was indicated by the brief announcements of doctors' orders that were repeated over the course of more than a year. Everything is merely a human being. Nelson only made a brief appearance at Outlaw Fest 2024 to welcome the audience before disappearing backstage to let his son Lucas take control. Despite the media's admiration for his fortitude, many of his close friends and family acknowledged that he had started to experience chronic body aches, particularly respiratory issues. Backstage, coughing, dyspnea, and the continual usage of oxygen tanks were commonplace. A quiet fell over the room as Willie Nelson showed up at Farm 840 in Minneapolis, standing next to his trigger. In a moment that seemed to be sung for him, he performed Last Leaf, a song devoted to people he had lost. Nelson simply waved and walked off the stage after the concert without doing any interviews. Additionally, all of his performances for the year were canceled a few weeks later. Willie was told to rest till he healed completely, the management team said briefly. Fans took notice when he canceled all of his performances, including the 4th of July picnic, which had been a part of his repertoire for 50 years. Band members remember Nelson always carrying his trigger guitar when he wasn't performing, sometimes sitting quietly to play a few chords as if he was checking to see if he had enough breath to sing. Nelson wrote in a brief post, "My health is my top priority. I will be back when things are better." One participant once declared that if he could take a breath, he would not stop. Willie Nelson's appearance changed, and the music industry took note. He ceased advertising his new record, which was just a few months away from being released, and seldom ever did interviews. Nelson started living in the middle of a farm, practicing lightly every morning, and spending more time in Texas, according to those close to him. In 2025, it was also observed that recording sessions were brief and separated by a few weeks. Nelson's simple response to a question concerning his health was, "I've been singing all my life. If I have to be quiet for a while, it's reasonable." This statement helped many people realize that Nelson might be getting ready to end his lengthy trip. In a talk show, he once said, "I'm not afraid of dying, I'm just afraid of stopping making music." This symbolic statement has now turned into a premonition, as reported by the media. He simply grinned when asked about his tour plans for the upcoming year in the most recent interview. "A location with more sunshine and fewer storms is probably what I'll pick. I can still sing at home if I am unable to attend." He still has the same sense of humor, although occasionally his voice becomes lower when he gasps in the middle of a sentence. His story then becomes even more emotional as his physical limitations, something that even an unbreakable icon like him cannot avoid, test his determination. The body broke it. Willie Nelson once declared that he did not believe in retirement, but his long-term accumulation of health issues over decades was the reason for that schedule. Nelson began smoking cigarettes at an early age and eventually smoked up to 3 packs a day. Before he made the decision to give up entirely in the late 1970s, this practice persisted for decades. He switched from smoking cigarettes to marijuana, which he said helped him stay balanced and avoid booze. However, Nelson's conviction that marijuana had health benefits did not save him from the repercussions. Since receiving a diagnosis of emphysema at a young age, he has battled breathing issues. Throughout his career, he has been hospitalized several times with shortness of breath, severe coughs, and pneumonia. He kept performing while still recuperating for years. Nelson was still in the public eye at a time when his peers had ceased touring. However, beginning in 2024, a few adjustments to his lifestyle revealed that his health had truly deteriorated to the point of concern. Willie Nelson used edibles or vaporizers in place of lighting marijuana to quit smoking it. He acknowledged, "I've been torturing my lungs for too long. Now they're telling me to stop." Although he has always been upbeat, this admission also shows that he no longer pushes the boundaries of his physical capabilities. He took a remarkably lengthy time to recover from COVID-19. Nelson was not admitted to the hospital, but for over 2 months, he had to wear a respiratory support device at home and lower the intensity of all his activities. He started cutting back on the number of songs he performed each night, minimizing his stage time and planning his rehearsals for early mornings when he felt most at ease. His support staff had an oxygen tank on hand during recent practices in case he felt fatigued at any time. Once his strong point became a daily struggle, he found it difficult to keep his voice. Nelson's physical state and complexion changed, and those who worked with him observed that he was recovering from each performance considerably more slowly than before. Nelson changed his diet to include more easily digested foods, protein shakes, and light meals. To get a good night's sleep, he took little amounts of THC but avoided potent stimulants. In order to preserve social customs, alcohol was typically only sipped on exceptional occasions. Nelson decided to walk around the farm, do deep breathing exercises, and play the guitar softly in the morning rather than jogging or engaging in other physically demanding activities. For Nelson's physique, 2024-2025 is thought to be the most challenging time. Doctors in the eastern United States are reportedly discovering indicators of diminished lung function, which is why a series of events have been postponed. For the purpose of monitoring, he was asked to cease all activity for 4 days. This is one of the few occasions when he complied with medical advice without protest. According to relatives, Nelson met privately with his family to decide on performance standards for the future. His performance schedule has become increasingly scant lately. Every event is carefully chosen, giving preference to locations with pleasant backstage areas and mild weather. The strategy to minimize workload to protect his health includes him ceasing to participate in live TV shows, declining interviews, and ceasing to film promotions for new music releases. He will have to decide how to continue without losing his individuality after he has a good understanding of his physical limitations. And he took that decision at a time when he believed he would never be able to bounce back after the IRS and the rebound, the largest catastrophe of his life, destroyed all of his possessions, reputation, and profession. Any artist would have been terrified to lose all they owned, including their gold albums, house bus recording equipment, and even their song copyrights, as was the case with Willie Nelson. His agreement with a gang of tax advisors who employed illicit financial shelters was the first of several financial blunders that led to it. Due to interest and penalties, the initial amount of over $2 million swiftly grew to $32 million when the IRS became involved. Just when he was getting back on track following the success of the albums Stardust and Poncho and Lefty, the incident blew up in the early 1990s. His assets were sealed and placed up for public auction on the day the seizure order was issued. Disassembled and listed are tour buses, Texas ranches, studio systems, guitars, and trophies. Knowing that the trigger was the one item he could not replace, Nelson quickly shipped it to a close friend in Hawaii. Before that occurred, he had owned this wooden guitar since 1969 and referred to it as a part of me. Nelson didn't give up. He did something. To make the album The IRS Tapes, he recorded a number of acoustic tracks with just guitar and vocals and no post-production work. Who's Going to Purchase My Memories? Published in 1991, a single phone number was used to sell the music, and the IRS received all proceeds. However, despite no significant marketing, the quantity of purchases greatly surpassed projections. The fan base was greatly impacted by those unpolished, honest, and unrefined songs. Nelson and his legal team sued Price Waterhouse, the firm that had provided advice on the tax shelters he was involved in, concurrently with recording and touring. he finally prevailed after years of pursuit. Some of that money was given back to the IRS. He used the remaining funds to restore his career and repurchase some of his personal belongings that had been put up for sale. Nelson was unique because of the manner he decided to handle the situation. Rather than going into hiding, he made an appearance on television, went on tour, and was candid in interviews about the incident. Both commercially and in terms of public perception, many in the business referred to it as a spectacular comeback. In addition to being a personal triumph, his repayment of a $32 million debt served as a model for artists in terms of money management. Nelson's behavior has radically changed since this shock. A strictly regulated tour schedule, a new accounting team, qualified legal counsel, and no hazardous investments in goods of unknown origin. Deeper losses in his personal life have also become commonplace for someone who has suffered financial loss without going bankrupt. Love, loss, and endurance. Willie Nelson has had personal losses connected to the most significant relationships in his life, in addition to financial and health issues. His life, his music, and his decision to perform in public were all profoundly impacted by the events in his family. Beneath the facade of an artist who never gave up, there was a man who had experienced a breakdown, lost a loved one, and was still committed to continuing his musical career. Willie Nelson had a turbulent romantic life. He had 3 children with Martha Matthews, whom he married for over 10 years. However, there were a lot of tense arguments in their relationship, thus it wasn't cheerful. In his memoir, Nelson acknowledged that there were periods of excessive behavior between him and Martha that ultimately resulted in their split. After learning that he had fathered a kid with someone else, Shirley Colley, his second wife, divorced him. A healthcare bill that was sent home taught Shirley something. Nelson only stated, "I am a person who lives by instinct, and sometimes instinct is not good for marriage," without denying or providing an explanation. He loved Connie Kupke, his third wife, very much, but their marriage ended because of his drinking and unstable lifestyle. They eventually broke up after numerous attempts at reconciliation. It was not until he met Annie D'Angelo that Nelson's personal life became stable. They have been married since 1991, have 2 sons, and have remained together to this day. When the IRS was after him for tens of millions of dollars and he was in danger of losing everything, Annie was by his side during his most trying time. Annie was instrumental in helping Nelson restructure his life, save what was valuable, and record an album to pay off his obligations during the period he was foreclosed on. One of Nelson's greatest sorrows was the death of his son Billy, who committed suicide in 1991 at the age of 33. Nelson reportedly remarked, "Annie came to me when I needed her the most. Without her, I don't know if I would have gotten back up." Billy, a musician himself, has collaborated with his father on several recordings. Nelson spent weeks making music and recording at home after his death, rather than having a public funeral. The same year, he published an album with nostalgic lyrics that were devoid of any explanation. Yet, the listener could sense the agony without words. The loss continued when Nelson said, "I couldn't save him, and that follows me to this day." In 2022, his sister Bobby Nelson, who had been his stage partner for over 50 years, died. Bobby was the band's lead pianist, and during every concert, he sat to the left of the trigger piano. An irreplaceable vacuum was created by her departure. Me and Sister Bobby Nelson, their joint autobiography, describes his impoverished upbringing in Texas, where he was reared by his grandparents in a home without running water or electricity. The two bonded on every stage, from little clubs to large concerts, having grown up surrounded by music. Nelson sent a black and white picture with a brief message after Bobby died, instead of hosting a lavish farewell service. "Even though my sister is more advanced than I am, I still enjoy her music on a daily basis." In recent years, Nelson has used his strong familial ties and unhealed scars as inspiration for his songs. The sentiments of appreciation, nostalgia, and separation are prevalent in recent albums like "Oh What a Beautiful World" and "Last Leaf on the Tree." Because of this, it is hard to discuss Nelson today without mentioning the spiritual path that has developed over the previous few decades, a path whose foundations, from start to finish, have always been intimately linked to the principles of community, life, and unchangeable values. Willie Nelson continues to pursue his artistic endeavors due to his enduring roots, not only out of habit or enthusiasm. He sees every time he takes the stage as a part of a duty he has ascribed to himself for many years, which is why his appearances are becoming more and more infrequent. Nelson does not fit the traditional definition of an artist. He bases his reputation and artistic worth on a very particular social base that is connected to the lives of working-class communities, farmers, marginalized individuals, and everyone else without a voice in the system. Nelson took issue with singer Bob Dylan's statement during Live Aid in 1985 that it would be good to host a performance for the American farmers who are losing their land. He recruited Neil Young and John Mellenchamp to plan Farm Aid, a nationwide initiative to generate money for family farmers. Over 50 musicians participated in the inaugural Farm Aid event in Illinois, which raised millions of dollars in a single day. For almost 40 years since then, Nelson has continued to serve as the program's co-founder, executive director, and spirit. Farm Aid serves as more than just a stage for performances. Nelson uses it as a platform to directly challenge land and economic policy, calling for small farmers' rights in opposition to corporate expansion. As of tweet 25, over $85 million had been donated through Farm Aid, which was utilized for organizing protests against unfair land policies, establishing credit funds for emergency relief, and providing legal assistance. Nelson is more than simply his name. As an insider, he has been attending hearings and traveling to all state meetings with farm groups. Nelson has been an early voice of concern about fuel pollution and climate change in addition to agriculture help. He has been investing in regional biofuel businesses and operating buses on vegetable oil since the middle of the 2000s. The entertainment industry could have a much bigger impact than releasing green albums if every artist converted a small portion of their tours to a greener model, he said. One of the rare artists who has openly advocated for Native American rights is Willie Nelson. In the midst of Native American protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline, he and his family performed in the Standing Rock encampment in the dead of winter in 2016. He simply brought his guitar and played a few well-known songs without giving a lengthy speech. That was sufficient to send a strong message. He joined them in standing. Nelson has participated in numerous efforts in the medical and social sectors to aid the homeless, veterans, and victims of natural disasters. He works directly with local groups to send commodities, medical supplies, and money to the appropriate locations during disasters like Hurricane Katrina or floods in the Midwest, rather than in planning large-scale projects. Despite never having made a commitment to finish it, Willie Nelson has managed to outlive everyone. When considering the lengthy voyage ahead, every appearance, song he selected to sing, and quiet has a deeper meaning. Please share your opinions below this video if you also feel that time is moving more quickly every time you hear him sing. To continue following us on our upcoming tales about irreplaceable icons, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel with individuals who grew up listening to his music.